Can we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag?
Takes me a second.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening. So you made it through the rain and the wind and good. We're calling to order the Grosse Ile Township Zoning Board of Appeals meeting of August 26, 2014 at 7 o'clock, so it's a little after 7. What we want is to look at the agenda. Are there any additions or deletions to the agenda? No. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
Make a motion to approve the agenda as stated.
Support?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Motion carries. Okay, we have the minutes of the April 22nd, 2014 Zoning Board of Appeals. Do we have any discussion on the minutes? Do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
I move that the minutes of the regular meeting of April 22nd, 2014 be approved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Seeing no opposition, the minutes are approved. So now we get down to the meat of the meeting. We're looking at appeal number 14-003, 004, excuse me. This is Mr. and Mrs. Daryl Filarski of 29396 East River Road. They've requested a public hearing before the Zoning Board of Appeals for a variance for replacement accessory structure at gazebo in a waterfront lot on lot number 253, Supervisors, Grosse Ile, plat number 48, subdivision as recorded in Wayne County Records, Township of Grosse Ile, County of Wayne, Michigan, also known as 29396 East River Road. Before we call the appellate's update, what we'd like to do is get Brian to give us an overview of the appeal. He'll help us understand exactly what is before us. So, Brian, you want to?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Welcome back, everyone. It's been a few months. Nice to see everybody. Before I get started, Mr. Chair, I do want to just put forth one quick reminder. I know the board is all aware, but I want to make sure that the petitioner and the audience both understand. Given that we are a little bit short-handed tonight, we have 5 members of a 7-member board. It does require 4 affirmative votes to pass a dimensional variance. So ultimately, if a motion is made to approve, it would need to be passed minimum 4-1 for you to have your variances granted. I just want to make sure that they understand that. So a 3-2 vote, although it's a majority, would not pass the variances. So just want to make sure that we're all starting off on the same foot as we move forward.
Brian, normally, you know, when we just have 4, there's been a precedent where we've said we've given the opportunity
Sure.
for the appellant to make a decision whether they want to carry on with 4 or 5. Seeing that we have 5, I'm not sure that that's an issue right now.
We're in a much better position with 5 than with 4, certainly. We would prefer 7, but obviously with the weather and whatnot, it's just it's not going to happen tonight.
Yeah, so we'll carry on with the 5.
Yeah, we can move forward, and if there's any issues as we progress, we can address them as they come up. So,
okay.
I do just have a brief slideshow I'd like to run through just to make sure we're all on the same page from get-go here. So as you've mentioned, the site we're dealing with is street address 29396 East River. It is this guy tucked back here. It is a stacked lot on the west side of East River, so it's a waterfront lot that does not have direct frontage on East River, but rather is accessed via a shared driveway behind other developed lots fronting East River. The specific request before you tonight does have to do with an accessory structure. It It is for the most part, it's a gazebo, which everybody can familiarize themselves with. It's approximately 300 square feet in area in terms of the gazebo itself. There is also a small enclosed portion that you should be aware of as well, and you can see that in some of the submittal materials, and I think one of my slides here tonight as well. About 70 to 80 square feet of this gazebo area would be enclosed for a small storage space. As the chairman noted, the structure is intended, or at least desired, to replace basically the same structure that was there previously in the same location. I believe it was last spring. Was it last spring? Last spring, the gazebo that was on site unfortunately was destroyed by fire. That structure was non-conforming given its size and given its placement in the waterfront yard, encroaching into the shoreline setback. So that's really what the petitioner is here for tonight. They would like to replace that. That is not allowed by ordinance. You can't rebuild a non-conforming structure if it's been damaged by more than 50% of its value. And as you can see, some of the photos in the submittal, it was damaged pretty much down to the ground. I believe parts of the foundation are still in place, but the structure itself was essentially leveled. Our pertinent ordinance sections tonight would include 19.11, which relates to accessory structures, and 23.5, which are the dimensional variance standards that you will apply in making a determination. I put another aerial in here, and I tried to zoom in. If you squint and look really, really closely, you can actually see the outline of the former structure, the gazebo that was out there. You have to look really hard through the trees, but I put this in here because I wanted you to have an idea of the relation from, dimensionally at least, from the house as well as the structure to the shoreline, and also the placement of the surrounding properties, the residences to the north and to the south, to give you a feel for exactly where that structure was. And again, the proposal is really to replicate what was there in pretty much, as I understand it, the same exact spot. So I put this in just to give you an idea of the spatial relationships. This is just to look at their site plan. As I mentioned at the outset, the property does have access via shared drive, does not actually have frontage on East River Road. These are the developed homes fronting East River, and then these lots were developed, or at least this lot has been developed off of the shared access drive. There are 3 other lots adjacent to them or near them that would access this shared drive, none of which are currently developed. So their home is developed. This is another idea, again, to give you an idea of the relationship of the spacing. I believe it's shown on the plan is about 130 feet off of the waterfront side of the residence, and that's approximately 300 feet from the gazebo to the actual shoreline. It does have a 14-foot side yard setback as well, to give you some perspective on the southerly side lot line. And then the next slide is a look at the structure itself. So here's an elevation view of the structure. Again, when most people say gazebo, you probably envision something similar to this, wooden structure with a shingled roof. And then if you look at the left side of the screen, this area with this vertical siding, this is the enclosed portion. And you can see it on an overhead view on, I think, at least one of the excerpts on the site plan drawing. So, but again, just to give you an idea, so I've approximated to the best of my ability. This is an octagon-shaped structure, so I took a length that was provided in the drawing. I plugged it into a couple of different calculations to try to figure out its area. When I did that, it spit out approximately 300 square feet. That's for the total structure, which I mentioned earlier. And then the petitioner has informed us that the enclosed space, I think originally it was around 70. I think the revised plan has noted as approximately 80 square feet. So I'm going to call it 80 to be conservative. That's what the most recent plan says. So that's what we'll go with.
Brian,
yes,
question.
Sir.
On the drawing, they have indicated on the drawing that the gazebo is approximately 331 square feet.
Yeah,
80 square feet is the storage area. So There's 331.
We can, I know that's the number they put down. I ran the number myself based on the dimensions of the length of one leg of the octagon-shaped structure, and I did it on multiple. I'm not smart enough to do the geometry myself. I did run it through calculations on multiple websites just to check and make sure I wasn't getting false reads. And each time I did it, it did come out to 300 on my calculation. So if you would like to go with my calculation, that's fine. If you want to be conservative and go with their calculation, I'm okay with that as well. Ultimately, the plans that are in the package, if approved, this is what they would have to build to these specs. So
Yeah, so
whether we call it 300 or we call it 330, the difference really is somewhat negligible. But if you want to call it 330 to go the safer route, I'm okay with that.
Okay.
I think that's a fair point to bring up. Thank you for mentioning that. So in terms of the actual ordinance provisions, Section 1911 does allow accessory structures in a waterfront yard, or on waterfront lots, excuse me, but there's a limitation on size, maximum 120 square feet. There's restrictions on yard placement in that they are to be in a non-required side yard or in the waterfront yard, but outside of the average shoreline setback. So there's a distinction there in terms of the yard placement and the setbacks that are required. In this particular case, they exceed the size threshold. We'll go with, pretend that says 330 instead of 300. We'll call it 330. So obviously that's the first variance. And then the second variance has to do with its yard placement, which is not only in the waterfront yard by definition, but also encroaches into the setback. Unfortunately, I can't give you, I wasn't able to provide you with an actual measurement in terms of what that setback encroachment is. You can see the waterfront development, if I go back to the aerials, is relatively sparse in this area, but it's pretty obviously into, if I'm to draw some general setback lines across the few developed properties, I think you can see that it certainly is an encroachment into the average shoreline setback, but I wasn't able to, I don't have enough information to be able to pinpoint an actual number of how much that may encroach. So if we're to move forward, I think the idea would be, if you were to consider approval, again, we've got the plans that are in front of us with the spacing, with the separation, and with the setbacks shown, and ultimately they would be bound by that placement if this was to be approved and move forward. And then the next point was simply a reminder in your ordinance, which, as we've discussed previously, is a little unusual. There's nothing wrong with it, just a little unusual. You have 14 different standards that you are to apply in the consideration of a dimensional variance. Those 14 are listed here. I'm happy to click back to this slide if at any point you want to look at these for reference purposes. With that being said, closing slide, just a quick overview. I did provide a full review letter for your consideration, and just a few takeaways from that. Again, the applicant is seeking 2 dimensional variances, one related to the size of an accessory structure in a waterfront yard or on a waterfront lot, and the other related to the encroachment into the average shoreline setback. The proposed structure does comply with all other dimensional requirements. So height, setbacks, lot coverage, building spacing, everything else is met. So those 2 variances are really our focus here this evening. The site, as you saw in the aerial photos, does have a single-family residence. The structure that is proposed is intended to replace a structure that was formerly on site. We went back, looked as far as we could, staff checked the property file, and the earliest record of this structure, I think, went back to 1986 or 1987. 87. Yeah, there wasn't actually a permit on file in terms of the property file for the construction of that gazebo, but we do know that at a minimum it was certainly there for at least about the better part of the last 27 years. My guess is, I think in talking with the petitioner, I think it's been there even longer than that. But That's just put out there for your information. The property itself, in terms of width and area, it exceeds R1B standards. About the only thing you could look at in terms of it being unusual would be two things. One of which would be that its overall width is relatively narrow in relation to its overall depth. Property is about 120 feet wide. If we take it all the way out into the water, it's over 1,000 feet deep. If we cut that back to the shoreline, it's still a really deep lot in comparison. The other thing is that it is also, it is non-conforming, as I mentioned earlier, in that it does not have any frontage along a roadway. Your ordinance, many years ago, the idea of stacked lots, there's a lot of them out there. It was not prohibited. I don't remember when that ordinance went in effect, but sometime in the last 10, 20 years or so, an ordinance was put in place that no longer allows stacked lots accessing a shared driveway, so to speak. You have to actually have frontage on a public or private roadway under your current ordinance regulations. 2 points, and I'll be finished, Mr. Chair. So I think the one that I think came through in my review letter, in all honesty, I think the only concern that I can find based on your review standards has to do with the spirit of the ordinance or the intent of the ordinance. When you look at Article 18, which is where your non-conforming provisions are found, the intent and the specific regulations are all tied to either gradual improvement of non-conforming conditions or a flat-out prohibition of allowing the rebuilding or replacement of non-conforming structures. So from that standpoint, I think you can pretty clearly say that particular standard is not met in consideration of the 14 points that you have to apply as ZBA. So that really is my one big concern with this. We've had a situation where a structure had been there for many years, was allowed to remain, allowed to continue without any issues. Unfortunately, obviously it was destroyed, it was damaged beyond repair by an act of God, if you will, nothing of the owner's doing. Unfortunate situation. Obviously, we don't want to see structures catch fire and burn to the ground. But nonetheless, that's why your non-conforming provisions are in place. If something is damaged to the point that it's beyond repair, then your ordinance prohibits its rebuilding or replacement in the absence of a variance. You're supposed to bring the site into compliance. Given that, that's why the applicant is before you tonight. Were it allowed to be rebuilt, we would have all had the night off and they'd already have their gazebo built. But nonetheless, we need to go through the process and allow you to hear comment and make a determination. Closing point is really that I don't see too many issues with some of the other standards, particularly as they relate to public safety, neighborhood impacts, neighborhood character. I think when you look at, if I go back to my old aerial here, I don't really see any impact on adjacent or surrounding properties. It's in the middle of a heavily wooded area. To be honest, I'm not sure that, certainly when foliage is on the trees, I'm not sure it would even be visible from off-site. Maybe in the winter it is, I'm not sure. Nonetheless, the structure was there for many years. You could almost make the case that it was part of the neighborhood character because it had been there for so long. But again, they're not simply allowed to rebuild and replace it, which is really where my one point of contention comes in, and that is just tied back to the intent of the non-conforming provision. So that's all I have right now, Mr. Chair. Happy to take any questions, or as we know, the petitioner and their representative are here tonight as well to take any questions that you may have.
Okay, just a question on the gazebo. They don't have a dimension from the lot line to the gazebo. There is a setback.
Which lot line, Mr. Chair?
The south lot line.
The south lot line, yeah, there is one drawing that shows a 14-foot side yard.
14 foot?
Yep.
One full, the other way.
Yeah, there's actually two site plans. There's a full plan and there's a zoomed-in plan.
Okay, I see it. Any other questions, the board?
Brian, parcels A, B, and C, it's shown on what I'll call a site plan.
Yes, sir.
Are those considered buildable lots?
I believe they would be because they were created prior to the effective date of the ordinance. I'm not in a position to say that they are not at this particular time. I believe they would be. But again, it's about as far as committed as I'm willing to go with that statement.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the board? Hearing none, what we'll do is entertain the appellants, if they can. Mr. Filarski, are you going to have somebody present for you? You're going to come up here and give us your name, address, and what your affiliation with the Filarskis is?
Okay. Okay. Thanks. My name's Mike Rickman. I'm with Fine Finishing. I was contracted by the homeowner to rebuild the proposed gazebo. Just getting back, thank you, Brian. First of all, I think you did a great job of showing exactly what we're trying to do. Getting back to the square footage in that that enclosed area that we're calling storage. The gazebo, when we use a CAD drawing, they're doing the overhangs, the 1-foot overhangs. So probably what he's looking at is the inside post dimensions with the 1-foot overhang. That's the discrepancy we're going to have between 336 and 300 square feet. The actual structure is going to be 300, but if you count the 1-foot overhangs around the two sides, it's going to be 336, along with the discrepancy with the enclosure. That enclosure was used, the structure was built with the house, from what I gather from the homeowners that built the house in, I believe, 1977. That enclosure there is being used as a pump house. There's also a 100-amp panel that is temporarily installed as right now, that was relocated outside the footprint of the building, waiting to go back in there. So that area was not only as a storage, but also did the pump house for the irrigation system as well. Those were just 2 points that I wanted to make that that we didn't talk about or cover.
Is that going to continue to be a pump house?
Yes, yeah. The electrical panel would still be in there. It's a 100-amp electrical panel that is served. The service comes from the house. The other hardship that I would make an argument for is, with this big of a lot, they really don't have room to put any accessory structure. They couldn't put it on the side lot. They can't put it in the front. They can't. This is really the best location for their use and what we feel is most comfortable for that lot. I mean, they don't want it in the front of their house, and there's no room on the side, even to put one there. There's a driveway there now with a lot of trees. And I put together some photographs of before and after from over the years, how they enjoyed it, and kind of showed you what the shot looks like with the tree line, so you can see that the site view is not going to be obstructed by the structure as much as probably the trees, to be quite honest with you.
Mike, and this gazebo is going to be the same footprint it was before?
Yes.
Is it pretty much going to be exactly like it was before?
Other than the decorative parts, it's going to be exactly the same size, same footprint, same space for the storage pump house area. Yes.
Mike, are there lights?
Yeah, there's going to be there's an electrical panel in there, and there's going to be lights inside the.
So that falls.
It's inside the pump house, not in the gazebo area.
So there's no outside lights.
There's no outside lights.
Okay.
Do you have anything else that you want to?
No, I just wanted to go over. I know that typically you guys work with 7 people, but if this becomes an issue, I mean, I don't know what the recourse is, or is it something that gets tabled? Like in the other communities, you could choose that it could be tabled to the next. Obviously, no one wants to do that because we're running out of time with our weather and stuff like that. I don't know how often you guys meet either, but how do you guys normally handle that? As far as if we wait for 7, or is that a pipe dream and that never happens anyway?
No, we meet once a month.
Okay.
All right. And that decision, it has to be made prior
Prior to voting.
vote.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, which we'll do if we have to. You know, one thing I'd like to hear is, when I look at that gazebo, I'd like to know from the owners the actual, how they feel about rebuilding the gazebo. I'd like to have their thoughts on why they want to rebuild.
Do you have the pictures that you can show? We've got pictures here that...
Do you have these packets?
We all have the
Okay.
pictures.
I mean, it was real attractive. The gazebo was very attractive. Okay, there's some on here. You can see them. And you couldn't see the gazebo, not even from the water.
You want to get to the mic?
Yes.
No, microphone.
The microphone.
Okay, you couldn't even see the gazebo from the water. You know, it was secluded. You know, and the waterfront property, well, you can see right there. I mean, it was completely hidden. So that's all I got to say. It's a beautiful gazebo, and I want to rebuild it. But if you guys don't want to let me, that's up to you.
No, it's just
I'd
the
rather
question.
take a tax break.
Yeah.
You know.
But the question really centers on, you know.
Jim, you've seen the property.
Yeah, I've seen the property. It's like a park.
Yeah.
It's like a park. I know that.
And this
So,
is very secluded.
Yeah, it's very secluded, like a park. So I just wanted to, you know, your feelings about the gazebo, because you've been there for over 30 years, and you've used the gazebo over 30 years. So you are committed.
Yeah, right.
To that gazebo.
But if you don't want me to rebuild it, it's a beauty that, you know, it's a shame to go by the wayside.
Yeah.
You know.
All right, Daryl. I get your gist. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Do we have any other questions?
I have one.
Okay.
Okay, so one of the problems is that there are two variances here. One of the problems is that this encroaches into the setback. Has any discussion been had about moving it so it does not encroach into the setback?
There's no location on this property,
Not at all? Okay,
no matter what, we'll need a variance to put any type of accessory structure anywhere on the property.
okay.
Okay, before we...
I got a couple.
Okay.
Can we discuss your site plan briefly?
Sure.
Are you a surveyor?
No.
Where did the angles come from?
These came from this site plan was off the file, off of a copy that you have in the file.
It's your site plan now.
Yes, that's correct. But I did not hire a survey company for a variance to spend $3,000 to fight for, you know, or to go out and try to get a gazebo, if that's what you're asking. I used an existing site plan that was in your guys' file.
So who was the surveyor? You should give him credit then.
All I did is I used the homeowner's existing survey.
In my opinion, that's not adequate. The second part of this, as it relates to the site plan, you don't bother to show the other residences in the area. If it weren't for the work that staff did, we wouldn't know there are any. Is there a reason for that?
Because they're just so far away, I didn't. To be quite honest with you, Gary, I mean, I don't mean to be disrespectful or anything, but this site plan, the homeowner wasn't prepared to spend $4,000 to get a site plan for something that they may not or you may grant.
That's your prerogative.
I understand that.
We do have a letter from from Lori Tyra to Russell Beaudry regarding this. He says there's a question. It says, "Hi Russell, the Flarskys will be going to ZBA on August 26th for replacement of their gazebo. Do you know when it burned down? Do you have any issues if this goes back up?" Then they come back and say, "Well, the storage shed gazebo burned on 5/26/2014. I have no issue." So this comes from a Russell Beaudry. That's a letter that's attached to the file. So I wanted to read that into the record. So that's for Russell Beaudry. Russell Beaudry is, where are they located?
So the fire
He's the
Russell Bowlby's the fire marshal.
Oh, the fire marshal, okay, he's a
Yeah,
fire marshal.
If I could,
Okay.
Mr. Chair, just quickly, just to explain that, when we see certain types of ZBA cases, sometimes we do send to police and or fire for comment. In this particular instance, because of the fact that the former structure burned to the ground, was destroyed by fire in essence, I did think it was appropriate to seek comment from the fire marshal, just to make sure that it wasn't something that was an unusual condition, that this location was susceptible to fire or whatever it might be. Not that I think that would be the case, but we did want to reach out to him and make sure that the fire department did not object, because you do have one of those 14 standards does relate back to public safety. So I thought it was appropriate to seek their input, just so you know where that came from.
Yeah, well, that's a good point, because actually the gazebo is quite a ways back from the road and from a hydrant. So, so that the fire, so what we're getting here is a statement saying that that is not a concern to the fire department.
Correct.
Okay.
One last question. What did destroy it? What did cause the fire that destroyed the gazebo?
Homeowner was doing some work in there, and spark fell between boards and got the gazebo on fire.
One more for Brian, if I could.
Okay.
Brian?
Yes, sir.
Is there, and I realize this is a wooded lot, and sight lines are what they are, and we don't accurately know where the neighboring houses now or future neighboring houses in lots A, B, and C.
Right.
Would our visual triangle come into play at all, in your opinion?
The clear vision triangle is actually specific to landscaping and not structures per se. So if you were to grant the variance, that would not necessarily be a consideration. And if you were to approve it, then there would not be an issue with that. The only thing I can say in terms of the lots to the north, A, B, and C, if they were to be developed, then we would probably want them to generally be in line with Mr. and Mrs. Filarski's home in terms of that average shoreline to sort of.
Yeah, and they seem to be in line with the, based on the aerial I got and the ones you supplied.
Yeah.
It all seems to be lined up. I mean, it's not on the site plan, so it's hard to tell, but.
Right. Yeah, generally speaking, I would expect if there were to be homes built in there, that's the line we would hold them to, or the staff would hold them to, just to give you an idea. Again, sort of the spatial relationship.
Yeah, okay, good enough, thank you.
Okay, I'd like to see if we have any comments from the public. Does anybody want to come up and speak on behalf of
Yes.
the appeal? Can you have your name, address?
My name is Lou Petrucco, and I live at 29310 East River. And I'm the neighbor just to the north of Darrell and Ellen. We've been there for at least 30 years or so. And I just want to reiterate what you already have gone over. We live in a very heavily, that whole area is heavily treed as we're looking out into Gibraltar Bay. And the neighbors there all live on a 1, 2, or 3 acre plot of land. So we got plenty of room in there. So that if you were to build a shed or a gazebo or anything else, I don't even see my neighbor. In the wintertime, I don't see them. The only issue is that we've got so many deer in there clearing it up a little bit for us. But otherwise, I have absolutely no objection to any building going on there that might be done. I didn't even hardly see the gazebo at all. The only reason that I would go over there to their homes for a party or something. So that, anyways, I have no objection to any of that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes.
Are there any other comments? Do we have any other comments? Hearing none, what I'd like to entertain is if we can get a motion on this appeal.
I'd like to make a motion that appeal number 14-004 be approved based on the drawings and measurements in the site plan that was provided.
Do we have a support?
I'll support.
We have discussion? Any discussion?
I'd just like to say, understanding our ordinances, and there's almost a reason for every one of them. But you have to take, I think, the reality of the situation and look at that, and along with the theory of the ordinance. And when you look at this with a heavy wooding, and this is something that I don't see impacting the neighbors, and it's certainly not impacting the neighborhood, and the fact that it's replacing almost exactly what was burnt down, I think it should be approved.
Okay, any other comments? Hearing no comments, can we have a vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing no opposition, motion carries. Thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Filarski. Okay. I don't know if we have any new business to... Brian, do you know if we have any new business, or if there's anything that's coming up?
As of right now, we do not, Mr. Chair.
Nothing coming for...
Public comment.
Okay, the next thing we want to do is entertain public comments. Does anyone want to come forward and make a public comment? Okay, please come forward, name, address.
Hi, my name is Lori Rumley. My address is 29768 Bayview Drive. I've been a Groseal resident for over 30 years, and I'm a Groseal teacher for Groseal Township Schools for the last 20 years. I live next door to Tom and Carol Zimmerman. I'm here tonight to represent my family and neighbors. I thank you for taking time to hear our request this evening. We wanted to share some information about a situation that we are dealing with in our neighborhood.
Can you pull the mic down, please?
Oh, sure, sorry. We're dealing with a situation in our neighborhood relating to the Zimmerman shed that was approved at your April 22 ZBA board meeting. We prepared a packet. I hope that each of you have it in your folder. Thank you. And it explains in detail the situation with some pictures to help you understand. Once you've had a chance to read the packet and...
Excuse me, I do not have a packet.
You do not have that?
It was in the email.
I had the email, but it's not.
Oh, okay.
But it wasn't a packet.
It was part of the PDF.
Okay, I apologize. I did
Okay.
bring them in. I was given today's date, so I brought them in yesterday. I didn't realize that you received
Okay,
your
yeah, I know what
material
you,
ahead.
I'm with you now.
Okay, thank you. Once you've had a chance to fully understand it and read it, we request that you enforce the instructions that you provided to Mr. Zimmerman on April 22 regarding the waste can storage, as well as ensure that Mr. Zimmerman complies with the ordinances regarding waste can storage and residential signs. And it was all provided in the information. In addition, we request that you advise Mr. Zimmerman that the property line is not to be used to harass neighbors, which once you do get a chance to see everything, you'll understand better. I thank you for your consideration. Thank you.
So your main issue is the storage of trash cans, is that?
The storage of trash cans and using the lot line to harass neighbors to the north with a big sign, and the trash cans were originally he put against the back side of his shed, which faces our driveway and yard. We did go to the expense of putting up some arborvitae to try to make our view a little more pleasant, and he then moved them out into the yard closer to the street, and then put the sign up right in our walk path when we walk to our house and when guests walk around our garage.
What does the sign say?
It says, "Love thy neighbor," and it's on the lot line facing our property. We have no issue with him having it on his property that he can enjoy, but we don't want it screaming at us as we walk to our home each day.
Mrs. Rowley,
Yes.
your issues really are not something that the ZBA takes care of. However, I will make sure that the ordinance enforcement officer looks into this. And it sounds like it's either ordinance enforcement or police, but not ZBA. But I will also review our meeting of the 22nd. I noted that based on the motion that was made, which is what we enforce, there's nothing in there concerning this. But I will review the discussion that was had during the meeting, and definitely we'll have the ordinance enforcement officer out there to look to see if there's any violations.
Okay, I appreciate that. And we did address you as the board because it was granted at your last meeting, and we do appreciate your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Are there any other public comments? Hearing none, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Support?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Hearing no opposition, meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.
Yeah, there's some